Welcome in, everyone, to the Hawks Eye podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Coots, and tonight I am joined by Mookie Alexander of Field Goals, and you're getting a double whammy. You're getting a preview show and a State of the Hawks show tonight, since Mookie hasn't been on to do a State of the Hawks for a while, so we're kind of just jamming them together and giving you a 2-for-1 special. So, Mookie, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. It's been raining cats and dogs out here, but that's kind of the normal thing in the Pacific Northwest. What do you expect? You don't expect it to be 70 and sunny in December. But it's the home stretch, everybody. It's the final month of the regular season, in effect. I know we got a week in January, but it's hard to believe that we're almost toward playoff time. And the fact that the Seahawks are this well positioned to make the playoffs, I think has to excite a lot of people. Job's not done yet, but we're to me, goal one, make the playoffs in the first place. But goal two, that number one seed is attainable. It's right there. So I am stoked to see what can happen in this home stretch for the Seahawks. Can they close strong in ways that they haven't done too often in recent years?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting final month of the season, and it's not going to be an easy slate for the Seahawks. Obviously, you got the Falcons here, which I think is going to be a tougher game than most people might assume is going to be. And then we got the Colts, we got the Rams, we got the Panthers, and we got the 49ers. There's no real easy games down that stretch. Should be interesting. But before we get into that conversation, if you are watching this and you have not already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Help me get over 2,000 subscribers. I'm getting close. I'm halfway there. I'm almost to 1,500. I want to get over 2,000 before the end of the NFL season. And also, if you love your Seahawks content, make sure you guys check out fieldgoals.com, where Mookie and a bunch of us all put up articles throughout the week that cover your Seahawks. So we'll get into this conversation surrounding the Atlanta Falcons and everything else Seahawks right after this. All right, Mookie. Well, let's start this off with some Seahawks general news that's come out over the last little bit here. Obviously, Mike Macdonald held his, last press conference before the team leaves and heads out to their game in Atlanta, on Sunday, the 10 a.m. slot kickoff Pacific time, which the Seahawks surprisingly have done quite well in the last decade plus since Pete Carroll really came in and kind of set the standard for that. But, couple of pieces of news. One, Quinton Bohanna is now a Green Bay Packer after the Seahawks waived him this week to make room. What did you make of that? Do you think that was hey, we're hoping we can slide him back through the practice squad, but now given trade deadlines passed, all these guys have to go through waivers?
Well, that's actually news to me. I genuinely did not know this because I've been gone for much of the afternoon. So I come here and find out Bohanna didn't clear waivers. So that's the second time the Seahawks have lost somebody to waivers. They lost Jarek Reed to the Titans, and now Quinton Bohanna gets a little better end of the bargain because he's going to a likely playoff team and not a team that might finish 1-16. Bohanna was hardly playing even when he was on the active roster, so he was just their defensive tackle depth. And I think Brandon Peely even getting the nod over him throughout the regular season was a sign that they were higher on Peely, and I think it's been justified. So best wishes to Bohanna. Elsewhere, at least he still most likely gets some January playoff run, and he'll be on the active roster, obviously, automatically since he was claimed off waivers. But with Jaron Reed coming back and then everybody else has been healthy, like somebody had to go, and Bohanna was just one of the easiest options. And it also speaks to how well Brandon Peely has played, that he can pretty much have a secure roster spot really through the end of the season.
Yeah, no, and the thing for me when I look at it, Mookie, with Bohanna, to your point, he hasn't played as much. Brandon Peely's really kind of taken over that role, and I think Brandon Peely is going to be a fixture in that Seattle defensive rotation for the years to come, as long as he can stay healthy. And they do have Singleton as well, who impressed in the preseason and in training camp. If they had to call someone back up, Riley Mills is obviously coming back from his injury, and hopefully he's able to make it fully back. I'm still kind of skeptical with the way McDonald's talk about them taking up the entire ramp up time, that he may not make it back, and they may just decide, hey, look, we're going to wait till next year anyways. But it is a positive that he is out practicing. He is a limited participant. Outside of that, the injury report came out. This might be one of the cleanest injury reports we've actually had all season, except for week 1, maybe, with the fact that they have 2 open roster spots. Jaron Reed and Julian Love were not listed on it. The only ones that are out are Riley Mills, and I believe, who is the other individual that was listed as out? Derek Young. So 2 guys that are coming back from injury. So that's a pretty positive report going into the back quarter of this season, the last final stretch run here.
Well, also the fact that Young is still not actually off of IR yet, and then Riley Mills is still on the non-football injury list. So nobody on the actual 53-man has been ruled out. Quandre Diggs, by the way, is week to week with a thigh injury. So even in 4 snaps played, unfortunately, he ends up getting hurt in his return to Seattle. But it's no big deal. So nobody on the active roster is out. That's good to hear. I just want to correct something. Only Sasquatch 78 jogged my memory that Darion Kendrick was also claimed off the waivers.
The Rams.
Anyway, I don't feel like he was necessarily, based on kind of reading between the lines, that they weren't eager to necessarily bring him back to the practice squad. But anyway, I know Seattle's got guys on the injury list still, and they can't activate all of them by the end of the regular season because there are only so many spots you can take up. But for the people who are on the active roster now, for them to have nobody out is big. And I also want to stress that this is going to be the first time we get to see the first team defense since week 1 all available. Well, actually, no, period, because Chenna didn't play week 1. So you're going to have everybody who was intended to play week 1 available for this game. Now, Julian Love might be on a bit of a snap count limit, I guess you could say, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because Ty Okada, I believe, has played his way into getting at least some snaps rotationally for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I think, you're going to Ty get subbed in throughout. I don't think this will be a situation where, okay, as soon as Julian's back, Ty's just on the bench. You're talking about a player in Julian Love coming back that hasn't really played in 10 weeks, right? Like, he has been missed 10 regular season weeks. It's going to take Julian quite a bit, I think, to get back into the swing of things, to really take a majority of that, play count. So it sounds like a snap count for him. I'm okay with that because I don't have a problem with Kobe and Ty running the show back there. But overall, it should be it's good to see that this team's getting healthy at the right time going into the final stretch here. The thing that I also want to talk about was some of Mike McDonald's comments, especially one in particular, Mookie, and we talked a little bit about it before we came on air here. His comments around Kenneth Walker at his press conference today, I think, are rather interesting in the sense of, Ken got named a captain this week. And then I believe I want to say Greg Bell, but I could be wrong. One of the Seahawks reporters kind of asked, why did Ken, what made Ken a captain this week? And Mike cited his attitude and how he's worked all season long. And, even in the timeshare that he's been in with Charbonnet and stuff. And then I think a question kind of got posed on whether or not, Ken Walker will be here in 2026. And Mike McDonald's expression, as well as his answer, leads me to believe I think Ken Walker's played himself into being a Seahawk a little bit longer.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Of course, Mike ain't the GM. He doesn't have the front office powers that Pete had. But Walker's on his way to a 1,000-yard season, and it feels like it's totally under the radar among Seahawks fans. Now, is 1,000 yards really impressive for a running back in a 17-game season? Not really, but you got to contextualize 2 things. One, he's not really a super running back one in the sense that he's getting 25, 30 carries a game. He's clearly in this timeshare deal with Zach Charbonnet. Walker does a lot of the work. Charbonnet gets all the touchdowns in the red zone. And then the second bit is running the ball at a high volume is something that not a lot of teams do anymore. It's still a passing league. And I don't think that's ever going to reverse course to where we're back to the 1970s and 80s, where running the ball was really just such a paramount importance at a high clip. So getting to 1,000 yards is, I think, of significance to Walker. He hasn't done it since his rookie season. And there's a good chance that he can play every game of this regular season. And it's not like Walker's been an inefficient on pace for 1,000 yards rushing. He's averaging 4.6 yards a carry. I believe this is his success rate. Almost sounded like Daffy Duck or Porky Pig there, but his success rate has been pretty good. And we're seeing more of him as a receiving back. So I think Walker is finding some comfortability in this blocking scheme, and especially on inside runs, actually, to me, more than the outside zone stuff, where Seattle's just struggled regardless of who's the running back. But even then, Walker's been better than Charbonnet. What I believe we're seeing, and forget last week, I know Charbonnet had more carries than Walker, but Seattle was in such control late in the game that I think they just kind of let Walker have the rest of the fourth quarter off. In the flow of normal game structure, Walker is clearly the number one guy, and there's no more debating it. And what I'm just waiting for is for Walker to have one of those breakout games, which is to say he gets well over 100. He hasn't had a 100-yard game since the Steelers game, I believe. I think it's his only one of the season. Just to see him hit the same play that he almost got against Minnesota before Harrison Smith brought him down, but take it all the way to the house. Like, put up a gaudy stat line. He pretty much did that against Atlanta last year. I don't think he had 100 receiving, but he was 100 rushing rather, but he was pretty close to it. And as John McGrath notes in the comments, Atlanta is really bad against the run. Their defense is okay, but their run defense has struggled, as such that Jonathan Taylor had 200-something yards against them in that game in Germany. So as far as Walker's future here, I went from, okay, he's probably gone. We know running backs are kind of a short shelf life, and they don't often get that second contract. But in his case, he's not been a top 3, top 4 running back. So he's not going to command a big payday on the market. So I think there's every reason to believe, and you brought this up before we went on air, that he could get a pretty reasonable deal that doesn't take up so much of the cap, which again is pretty much always increasing. And I think it would be kind of considered a lower risk move. And Seattle has been willing to extend their running backs before, just not consistently. They did it with Carson, and Carson had his injury problems too. I mean, the dude broke his ankle year 1. So yeah, Carson got his money. Marshawn obviously got his money after coming here. And it's really been those two, but Walker, I think, has been the best back since then, because Rashad just got injured too many times to justify another year. So I'm interested to see what happens with Walker in the offseason.
Yeah, and speaking to some of that, what could a contract look like for Kenneth Walker? Looking at some of the running backs that are the highest paid, so you got Saquon Barkley, you've got Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara. We know he's not in that category. The consistency and the production just hasn't been there. When you start getting down that list, you go to Josh Jacobs, you go to James Cook, and then there's 2 guys there right in this area that I think are really good contractually comps for Kenneth Walker and what a contract could look like, and that's Kyren Williams and Aaron Jones. And so for fact, Aaron Jones, he $20 million total value for his contract, average of 10 per year, total guarantee of the contract was 13.5 and fully of it was 11.5. And, Williams is a little bit higher than that. He's in, the 33 fully valued contract range, but I don't see a 2-year, $20 million deal for Kenneth Walker where you have it where it's somewhat incentive based on him staying healthy, how many games he's playing, what his totals look like. I think that's a very fair conversation and comp to have for Kenneth Walker if there is a contract to be had this offseason.
Yeah, so something to not break the bank over. I know paying running backs, period, is a constant debate in our circles, but in Walker's case, I think he's been good enough to get good running back money, not great running back or elite running back money. And there's a distinct difference to be made there, much in the way that if, say, Kobe Bryant gets extended by the Seahawks, or he goes and walks in free agency, he's not going to get top 5 safety money. That is not happening. But he can get, hey, this is a good role player. But basically Walker's goal, maybe kind of betting on himself, turn that 2-year contract into a longer-term contract, whether with Seattle or another team, preferably Seattle, because it's been a revolving door running back for Seattle since Marshawn left, or Marshawn was more or less a spent force. Whether it was Thomas Rawls, the cheap option, undrafted Thomas Rawls, injury, Rashad Penny, so many injuries, and by the time he got going, he got injured again. We know with Chris Carson, it's injuries to start and end his career, literally a career ender. And then we have K9, and K9 has had his injuries, but he's never missed more than 5 games in a season. So it's not like he's had a super long-term absence. And then Zach Charbonnet has been thankfully very healthy, but he just lacks that special quality in a top running back, at least in my opinion, to really be an RB1 on a consistent basis. So just having a guy you can rely upon who knows the system and who can be an explosive play option, I think that can mean a lot for Clint Kubiak's offense, and certainly a good running back can always help a good quarterback and vice versa. And that's ideally what we see with the Seahawks.
And the thing is, too, and you look at this running back room going into next year, and I know we're looking ahead here a little bit, but we don't know what Kenny Mack we're going to get back coming off his knee injury. I think it's his second or his third knee injury that he's had, and that's never a good thing to have for a guy that's trying to be on the roster. George Halani will be back potentially, but we kind of know what George Halani's ceiling is potentially as a change of pace guy. The one I'm most interested in next year that I think will be an interesting guy in camp and stuff is Jacardier Wright, because I thought he had a fantastic camp, and he's a bit of a bigger back. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But Mookie, to your point earlier with the run game and the way they've been running the ball lately and how it's gotten better, you look at Kenneth Walker, and, he over the season, he is less of an inside zone runner than Zach Charbonnet. Charbonnet, 29% of his carries are inside zone. Ken's at 16. However, Ken is a full yard better per carry in inside zone than Charbonnet. When we flip those numbers and look at outside zone, Ken's the leader there with 36% of his carries coming from the outside zone. But again, Charbonnet 27, Charbonnet's averaging 3.7. Ken's now averaging 5.8 on his outside zone runs. So you're seeing that. And the thing I think that the biggest tell here in the last, at least I'd say 4 weeks, is I think Ken's understanding what the scheme is asking of him and that he can't do these jump steps and cut back the way that he was doing and losing yards. Like you see him, and there was a run in that Vikings game where I don't know, the poor corner that decided to come up and try and lay a hit on Ken got the worst end of it, but he's pressing that hole and just committing like, hey, you know what? It may not be there for the home run. I'm going to get 3 yards out of this. I'm going to get a yard out of this. And he just presses and staying with it rather than trying to bail out of it and go back the other way the minute it's not there.
Yeah, he's running with some extra oomph in his game. I think it was Isaiah Rodgers he sunned. And look, the running game might be pivotal for the Seahawks over these last however many games. What are we? They're 9-3, so you got 5 more games to go. I already mentioned Atlanta's defense not good against the run. Don't know the Colts run defense off the top of my head, but the Rams run defense is very difficult. But they got picked on last week by Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. So they're not impenetrable. And he even had a couple of good runs in that first Rams game. They just didn't really commit to him on a consistent basis. And he did score Seattle's only touchdown that game. And you go to Carolina, the Panthers defense is all over the place. Some days they actually look good, and other days they're just complete liability. And then San Francisco's defense is understandably not very good because they're just missing so many people. But if this pass game doesn't pick up to back to kind of like the Washington and any game before that, they're going to need that run game to step up. And depending on how Seattle season shapes up, like you could end up not being in an advantageous stadium. Like in other words, you're not playing at Lumen Field. You're playing in a place where the elements kind of dictate that running the ball might be a better option than throwing the ball for a variety of reasons. One thing I want to note about Walker, he doesn't fumble. And on this extremely fumble-prone team, actually neither he nor Charbonnet fumbles. So this is really challenge accepted for both of them this Sunday to not make me do the podcaster jinx. But Walker's only fumbled 1 time over 4 seasons. And that was against the Jets on the first play of the game or second play. And the Seahawks recovered it. He has another fumble that is attributed to him that was a bad Wildcat snap that kind of hit him low in the hands. It was in the Pittsburgh disaster 2 years ago. So I don't really put that on him. So for him to have that many carries and only fumble once, I think that's a pretty significant thing, because I love Chris Carson, but that 2019 season where he fumbled like 5 times in 6 weeks and Pete wouldn't bench him even for one carry, that was a little bit annoying. And we know Kristen Michael's history with fumbling has gotten him kind of in ball security issues, kind of shortened his career in Seattle. So I think there are enough qualities in Walker for him to stick around. It doesn't have to be, restarting at the running back position. I think anybody who believes that Charbonnet is going to be like the RB1 moving forward, and especially in his own contract here, I think that's a bit of wishful thinking. He just doesn't have that consistency in his game outside of the touchdowns, I guess, to really exhibit that kind of justification of a starting job.
Yeah, and it'll be an interesting thing to see how it goes over the back half of or back last month of the season, I should say, to see if Ken and going into the playoffs can really kind of take another step forward in this run game, and this run game as a whole take that step forward. But Mookie, let's discuss this game, tomorrow, or on Sunday night, I should say. I was about to say tomorrow night, on Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon. Morning. Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. I've had a long work week. I just want the Seahawks to play. I just need them to play, Mookie. Let's talk about this. So we got two teams that are in kind of a different situation. Atlanta is still theoretically in play to win their division because the NFC South is just all over the place. Like, I thought the Bucs are going to run away with that division, and their injuries have kind of caught up to them in some respect. But, when you look at this matchup, Mookie, just initially in the snapshot here, you got one of the most balanced and statistically explosive offenses in the NFL meeting a team that's like completely on the other spectrum of this, right? We're talking about a team that ranks bottom third in yards. They rank, one of the highest in rush attempts, though, the Atlanta Falcons are with Bijan, but necessarily the stats don't help make that case. If I was to ask you, like, is there a lingering concern for you about Seattle's offense going into this game still, even though it is a top 3 scoring unit?
How they will react to Atlanta being a blitz-heavy team. Because I don't think that Darnold is bad against the blitz or anything, but I do worry about the offensive line's ability to pick up these blitzes and for them to run a functional offense against extra men. Otherwise, like on paper, Seattle should win this game. They're a pretty sizable road favorites, and Atlanta might still be in this division race, but they are basically walking the plank. To make another reference to the team they're chasing, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But their heel is basically the only thing on the plank before they fall into the ocean and the shark-infested waters. Because if they lose this game, they are mathematically eliminated. The problem for Atlanta is they were swept by Carolina, and Carolina's on 7 wins, and they play Tampa Bay twice. So either Carolina just loses out, and it helps Atlanta. But the other problem is if Carolina loses out, that means Tampa Bay's won 2 games. And if Tampa Bay wins 2 games, Tampa Bay's got 9 wins. Atlanta can only get to 8 and 9. So they need one good outcome this weekend to beat Seattle. Carolina's on a bye, and for New Orleans to upset Tampa Bay. And New Orleans is kind of a weird team. They're a poor team, but they've been reasonably competitive with Tyler Shuck. So division games could get funky. Maybe there is that chance Tampa Bay suffers a surprise loss. But if that happens, if Atlanta wins and Tampa Bay loses, then Atlanta-Tampa Bay has got a little bit more of a interest for everybody on the ensuing Thursday night, because it would kind of be Atlanta's last stand or real chance to get back in the division race. But otherwise, I think there's more to it for Seattle, because the Rams, I believe, are going to beat Detroit next week. And whether they do or not, Seattle, I don't think, can afford to lose but one game the rest of the season. And if that one game is the Rams, then forget the division. So what I'm really getting at is I don't think they can really afford to lose any of the non-NFC West games. So that means you got to beat Carolina, Indianapolis, and Atlanta, bare minimum. So that means getting to 12 wins. And then San Francisco and LA, seriously, all the marbles there. But San Francisco, we're not quite sure what stakes will be there for Week 18. But you have to be at no worse than one game back of the Rams heading into Week 16. And ideally, you're tied, or the Rams somehow screw up and Seattle is a game up on the Rams heading into Thursday night. So I think that Seattle's not going to treat this game lightly. McDonald's, what we have seen, Seattle's played a pretty easy schedule, but they're stomping bad teams. And that is a total, I won't say a total departure from the Carroll teams, because Carroll's teams definitely had their share of blowout wins. But the recent Carroll teams, they made a meal out of a lot of games they should be winning comfortably. And even last year's team with McDonald, the actual loss to the Giants, or struggling with the Bears team that already fired its coaching staff. So, I'm sure Atlanta is going to be playing for a little bit more than pride. The one desperation bits may not be the playoffs. It might be Raheem Morris coaching for his job, because he could get fired at the end of the season. They had expectations of being in this division race and being a playoff team. And even if Penix was healthy and Drake London is healthy, they might still be a non-playoff team right now. That's how disappointing they've been.
Yeah, the Falcons definitely was a team that I had that I thought was going to be a wild card team, especially how they finished out the end of last year with how Penix was playing. Yeah, you're right. It very much could be Raheem Morris coaching for his job. And if the Seahawks are to lose a game down this month of the schedule here, Mookie, the last month, I think the only game realistically they can give up is the Colts game because it's an AFC team. It cannot be any of the NFC games because you need that tiebreaker of the NFC wins, given the fact that the Rams now have lost. I think all of their games, if I'm not mistaken, have been to NFC teams, have they not? All their losses?
Yep.
So, and it's the same for Seattle. All of Seattle's losses have been to an NFC team, unfortunately. So if you can lose, if you're going to lose one of the AFC and win out, it might help you in that chance there of that. But Mookie, let's move on to this. Let's talk about the offense matchup here. So Seattle's offense taking on the line of defense. Can the protection hold long enough? And you alluded to it just a moment ago about this pass rush for the Atlanta Falcons. And, their run defense has been okay. It hasn't been great. It's a unit that definitely needs improvement, but their pass rush is where they've started to make some hay, and the blitzes that they do. Their third down defense is above league average in general. Seattle's scoring, upwards of 27, 30 points a game is kind of where they're hanging out. But the big thing for them is this explosive pass offense and JSN in that. So, first question I got for you here, Mookie, is how is Clint Kubiak going to adjust to what the Falcons did coming out of this Vikings pressure plan that exposed a lot of Seattle's protection issues?
Yeah, I am wondering how they're going to handle Ulbricht's blitzing versus Brian Flores, because those are two, just because they both like to blitz a lot doesn't mean they run the same stuff. I'm not sure Atlanta is necessarily a team that can disguise as much as Minnesota loves to disguise. That has been a common theme, though. The more post-snap disguising that a defense does, at least a good one, the more that Darnold struggles and the offensive line struggles. So I think that they are going to rely on the running game a little bit more this weekend, especially to exploit Atlanta's run defense and to protect the offensive line and pass protection. And I really emphasize the O-line more than Darnold, because Darnold hasn't really taken many bad sacks where he's held onto the ball too long. He hasn't taken many sacks, period. So he's been exceptional as far as getting the ball out on time. The Vikings game is sort of an aberration relative to the rest of the season. But one thing that is interesting with the Falcons is they have spent years being pretty much at the bottom of the league in sacks. Would anyone have bet that the Falcons would have more sacks than the Seahawks? They have 41. Seattle has 40. I think that's a pleasant surprise for them. It's just that everything else about the team has been a disappointment pretty much. So now there's going to be one guy who's not there, Brandon Dorlus, defensive lineman. He is out for this game. So that's their leading guy in sacks. But they got, what's his name? Walker, Jalen Walker, I think, from Georgia. And then James Pierce out of Tennessee is very relevant to Seahawks fans for one reason. He was the guy that the Falcons chose when they traded back into the first round of the draft and have essentially gifted the Rams a top 10 pick next year. Now, I guess it'll be a good thing for the Falcons, and they won't care that they'll lose a top 10 pick next year if Pierce becomes a perennial Pro Bowler. It's just that why did it have to be the Rams? Like if they gave up that first round pick to say, the Tampa, well, not a division rival, but to say the Philadelphia Eagles or the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think any of us would care. It's just that why did the Rams need to have more ammunition? So Atlanta's pass rush is worth respecting. And I think we might see some more heavy packages again, more 12 and more 13 to help protect Darnold. But I want to see how the quick game adjusts. So you mentioned this last week, the issues in quick game where they're not cutting with the linemen, but also I feel like they're not hitting like slant plays or something on these quick passes nearly enough. It can't be screen passes all the time as a means of countering the blitz, but they have to be better with the way that they attack these blitzes without, going for explosive plays, because that's kind of been one of the things that has been a favorite of the Seahawks, even dating back to the Russ days, is if there's somebody blitzing and it's an all-out pressure, they want to hit a home run. Well, sometimes it's okay to take an underneath and turn it into big game. To me, this is where Rashid Shaheed should be used right now, and where Torrey Horton would have been valuable had he been available. So I know they're going to be keying on Jackson Smith and Jigba, a lot because the Vikings did. But I think there are going to be opportunities for the Seahawks offense to slow down this Falcons pass rush. Just kind of do things to discourage them from blitzing so much.
Yeah, and I've gone back and I've watched the All-22 at least 3 or 4 times this week just to figure out what the protection issues were and see if it was going to change any of my post-game reaction on Seahawks aftermath that we had. And it did actually. There were a few things that came out in that. And one of the things is the amount of times we're having to keep our tight ends and running backs into max protect and these quick options. And that's where you get in trouble. Like there was the one play, the one Mookie you cited with Arroyo where we threw the deep jump ball to him for no reason, and there was Barner and Arroyo. Well, really, we had to keep Barner in initially to block, and he leaked out late after Sam broke the pocket. But there's no easy check down out of that. It was like a hook and a backside dig from JSN. And some people are like, oh, he should have thrown to JSN. Well, based off the read and what quarterbacks are taught, quarterbacks are supposed to throw into the blitz because the rule of thumb is, hey, we're throwing into the blitz because they'll have one less defender there. And by the time the defender that's supposed to replace gets there, we should already have the ball in our receiver's hands. Problem is what Flores did so well with that is basically his mod technique for his corners, which is you're in man, but you make it look like zone. And your only rule of man is if he runs deep, you run with him. Other than that, you're playing in basically a cloud defense sitting in the flats. And that's where he caught a lot of the Kubiak quick hooks in trouble with Cooper Kupp and JSN. And so, I know there's a lot of people out there, that people were talking about. I know I coined the thing about Badford in the game. When I went back and watched the sacks and I watched Anthony Bradford and I know there's he's a lightning rod topic right now. I didn't notice Anthony Bradford being as much at fault for those as I initially thought watching the TV copy. When I've gone back and watched the All-22, like there were scheme issues. There were situations where, Lucas got beat and it threw off. And there were things that Flores did that were phenomenal in messing with Anthony Bradford, where he had guys that were walked up right there that are supposed to look like they're coming and then they bail away. Mm-hmm. And by that time, Olu, who is the center, who is calling the protection, has called it out based on that front, and that leaves your right guard with his responsibility on that. And when his guy doesn't come, he's kind of left in no man's land. Yeah. So watching it back, I don't think Anthony Bradford played as bad as initially I thought. Watching the TV copy and watching now the game film of it, I'm going, okay, yeah, he did have bad reps. The pull was absolutely atrocious. I won't, say that Anthony Bradford played a perfect game. I think the whole unit as a whole, and Clint Kubiak and John Benton especially, I think both of them got out-coached in that first half massively. And they made some really good adjustments in the second half. It'll be interesting to see what Bradford does in this game because I think you're going to see a lot of the same things from the front of Atlanta trying to mess with the protection calls. It'll be interesting when Sundell comes back, if they open up that competition with Bradford and Sundell, or Sundell goes right back to center because, I watched Olu in that game, and I thought Olu played pretty well. I was actually a little bit discouraged by watching Olu's pass protection in that game and the amount of times he got rocked back in that game. And it was a lot of the times, like on, that one particular play where the rollout occurred for Sam to throw it to Arroyo into double coverage, Olu gets blown back into Sam. Like he gets sent back about 4 yards. And, that's to me where I look at it and I go, okay, so there is still some issues in there. Like Olu's made the run game work better. And I'm not saying here I want Anthony Bradford to be the starting right guard for the Seattle Seahawks in 2026. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying after going back and watching it multiple times and making notes and just seeing different things, I've come to the conclusion he wasn't as bad as it looked. But it's something you have to go back and dive into because just to look at it initially, it looked bad. But then to watch it and see everything else from the different angles, I would say Anthony Bradford didn't play nearly as bad as the initial impression was. And I'll be the first one to say that after going back and watching it.
Yeah, it's just the run blocking thing that I think is irking me more because that's supposed to be his strength. And some of the worst reps for him the last few weeks have actually been in the run game, not the pass.
And I think Daniel Jeremiah said it really good on Mike and Salk this week, Mookie, where they basically kind of talked about, what was your draft profile on Anthony Bradford? And the way he described Anthony Bradford to me is he is a perfect power gap guard. He knows his track and he can get his hands on you right away going north-south, not east-west. He's great. And I think that's where you're seeing the issue with Anthony Bradford is he struggles in zone because it's about playing in space. And one of Daniel Jeremiah's first things he said was he does not play in space well. Well, then he's not going to be a fit for a zone scheme because the whole concept of zone is your linemen are good at finding work in space. And so I think that's why you'll see the change. But it is a situation where I look at it and I go, yes, Anthony Bradford is not a good right guard, but you're not going to get a good right guard right now.
Nope. And that calf injury he supposedly had on Thursday was not serious enough for him to have a game designation, so he will play. Poor Christian Haynes, every time it looks like he's about to get a starting job, somebody is readily available to play. Gray Zabel, 2 weeks ago, we thought, oh my God, he's going to miss time. And then he's good to go right away. And then Bradford goes from full to limited to he's fine. So Haynes gets to sit again. But yes, the Bradford whiffs are like the stuff of legend or infamy, if you will, at this point. But as you said, he when he gets north-south, he can be good. And I think the problem for Seattle is that they don't have a lot of people who can just physically maul people down the field. Zabel is one of them. But Oluwatimi doesn't really do that. Lucas, I think, can. In fact, Lucas has at times. We remember the pancaking that Lucas did that excited everybody at the start of his career. But in terms of just pure mauling, Bradford is kind of one of your better options. It's just that if he doesn't maul you, then he's probably letting a guy go by. So that's kind of the thing with him. When he plays in space and has to kind of like make a quick decision or get his hands on somebody, that's where the whiffs end up looking like so cringy.
Yeah, they are. And there was a couple in the run game where he just leans way too far forward and doesn't even get his hands up and they're outside and he just gets swam by a D tackle and it happens. And that's what I mean. Like I'm not sitting here going, Anthony Bradford, is a good regard. I'm not trying to sugarcoat his performance. It wasn't great in certain aspects for sure. But I also don't think it was as bad as it initially looked when you go back and watch the All 22. And the All 22 film gives you a different perspective than what you get on the TV copy. And it's just the reality of it. And so, again, it'll be interesting to see how they handle certain things that come out in this game from the Falcons defensively. But, Mookie, the last thing, I'm going to ask you about this particular, offense versus defensive matchup is this going to be a situation where Seattle finally gets their second pass option going, whether it is Rashid Shaheed, whether it is, an Arroyo or an AJ Barner or somebody really get a number 2 target involved?
I think they have to. Otherwise, you're really opening the door for an upset. So I've mentioned it repeatedly that ever since Horton went out, there has been almost no productivity of consequence from the number 2 receiving option. So Cooper Kupp, I guess, has a 60-something yard catch against Arizona. He had 3 catches for 20-something yards against Minnesota. But I think combined, the non-Smith and Jigba receivers have 15 receptions over the last month. Cody White, I think, has one of the few explosives, and it was that blitz-beating slant at which he was a yard short the first time he was able to break a tackle, and then a whole host of Seahawks big fellas ended up shoving him forward. But to me, it's really about Shaheed and finding a way to get him involved a little bit more, not just as a running back. I don't remember his history against the Falcons, but I think he's had some bigger games. So, last year, he had 8 catches for 83 yards in a loss to Atlanta. And he also had a big play, 3 catches, 95-yard game in 2022 for a touchdown. So he's got familiarity against the Falcons. And maybe that is an opportunity to hit some deep passes his way instead of relying on Smith and Jigba as this explosive option. I think that Cooper Kupp could be at that middle of the field option as well, in addition to Smith and Jigba. Maybe we get to see one more vintage Cooper Kupp game coming out. It was cool to see him actually break a tackle and then make a guy miss in space. It might have been Rodgers, because Rodgers was not really tackling anybody in that Minnesota game. But I really just want a second receiver to emerge in this offense sooner rather than later, because I don't know if Horton's coming back. You notice they haven't really asked about Torrey Horton these last couple of weeks. So we're going to get close. Next week 16 is when he can come off of IR. But realistically, is he going to do a Sunday to Thursday turnaround? because week 15 is Sunday and then week 16 is Thursday again. So he's probably not back till week 17 at the earliest. And during that time, Shaheed is probably going to have to step up. And so Dan Conroy in the comments saying Darnold's been working with Shaheed on timing this week. We have seen some timing issues between those two, but it's to be expected because he didn't work with them at all in the offseason. So there are going to be some chemistry issues. And Shaheed's not a number one receiver. So as I mentioned on Seahawks Aftermath, some of the more notable trades, like Jacoby Myers was receiver one in the Raiders with Las Vegas, and he was pretty much receiver one on some bad Patriots teams. And he's fitting in quite well in Jacksonville. But Rashid Shaheed has always been a wide receiver two at most in New Orleans and lower than that early in his career. So he's not going to get the same type of productivity just by being a wide receiver two or wide receiver three in Seattle. And it's going to take time to acclimate to a new quarterback, no matter how much his familiarity with Kubiak's system has any value. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what the Seahawks do now that they've had a game finally where Smith and Jigba is a non-factor and the passing game doesn't work. So I don't think that's going to happen again, or it's not going to happen too much more the rest of the season. But yeah, find somebody else other than JSN. And if the receivers continue to not be a factor, hit up those tight ends, hit up Barner more, hit up Elijah Arroyo more, line up Arroyo receiver occasionally, and then continue to use Ken Walker as this receiving back option. He's not Jahmyr Gibbs. He's not Bijan Robinson. I mean, I know Bijan is amazing as far as being a receiving back as well, but Walker in space, I think that's nothing stopping him from running a wheel route. Hell, did he not catch a touchdown last year on that type of route? That diving catch?
He did again. Wasn't it against Atlanta he did it?
Yeah, it was against Atlanta. So I think that there is some value there as far as if you're going to spread the ball out, find somebody. So we might be kind of in the second receiver by committee thing until Horton comes back, because I truly believe Horton has got wide receiver two written all over him next year. But they're just going to have to find another option to kind of, to me, also open up looks for JSN again.
Agreed. All right, Mookie, let's flip the side here. Let's look at this Falcons run game and offense versus Seattle and their front seven here. And I think this is the matchup that decides the game in a lot of ways. You know, you're talking about the Falcons here. They're a top 5 rushing volume team in attempts per game. However, their pass offense is at the other spectrum of that and one of the worst in the NFL. They've really won their games by controlling tempo and staying ahead of the sticks. That's what's gotten Atlanta their wins this year. And we know the story with Seattle's defense, really. Like, they're allowing 19.1 points per game. They're a top scoring defense. They're a top yardage defense, top 10. You know, they've held multiple points under 20 points, or multiple opponents, I should say, under 20 points. You know, again, you know, their opponents' rush per game sits in the middle of the NFL. Like, it's not great. You don't get a lot of space to run in Seattle. You know, so the question I'll first ask you is, how should Seattle defend Bijan without overcommitting to it?
This is going to be interesting, because I want to see how often Nicky Menwari and some other guys from the secondary are going to come down the box. And then Drake Thomas, of course, continuing to be that blitzing backer who blows up run plays. The thing with Robinson and the Falcons offense in general is, you want to talk about outside running. That is where Bijan lives. I mean, his 81-yard touchdown, I think, was on an outside. It was either a dual block or I can't remember the call, but it was definitely designed to go outside and down the sideline. And Robinson's just got that tremendous open field speed. So the Falcons' run game has been a little inconsistent. I know he had that big game against Buffalo, and then they just couldn't run the ball for 3 straight weeks. And now it's starting to pick up again. Seattle's run defense has been fantastic all season. There have been a few leaks here and there, though. Like, they had a couple of very shaky moments against the Rams and Kyron Williams. And I think Blake Corum had a big run too. It's just the Rams didn't have a lot of plays. So we didn't get to see Kyron Williams break 100 yards. He was very, very close to ending the 100-yard rushing streak. Seattle's been amazing at not allowing guys to get over 100 against them. Bijan is 5 yards away from 1,000. So if it's a game of running laterally, then I think Seattle's got the team speed to basically meet Bijan there. You just got to make sure you don't miss at the first level, because if it gets into the open field, then we got some problems. I'm not as worried about stopping Tyler Algier. He is more of a power back. He's basically their Charbonnet. And in fact, both him and Charbonnet have got 8 rushing touchdowns, and they're under 4 yards a carry. So they're the ones who are the secondary backs who touchdown vulture from the better running backs. So to me, if you stop Bijan, you stop the Falcons offense, because without Drake London, this is a very limited passing attack. I mean, Kyle Pitts, of course, he's just like a good tight end, maybe at his best, but he hasn't really been what his draft status was. Like he hasn't become that generational player at the position. And then Robinson is a threat as a receiver. So they're going to have to be wary of that. They have to stop him both against the run and against the pass. You stop Bijan, though, and I can't remember if it was Bijan or Bijan, but we'll go with B-Rob. Or maybe that's a problem because of Brian Robinson, but we'll go with Robinson. You stop Robinson, Atlanta's passing attack just doesn't have enough. Like, you take away him, take away London. Darnell Mooney is the second leading wide receiver on the team. He's got 21 catches. And then there are no other Falcons receivers who have 10 catches. Like, that's how limited their wide receiver group has been. So to me, I think that the Seahawks are going to be equipped to maybe give up a good run here and there, but in general, I think that they can stop Robinson. And if that happens, I mean, it's not like Kirk Cousins is going to be able to beat you with his legs. And frankly, neither does Penix. So an immobile quarterback, and an aging one at that, means that they don't have to worry about a play action, read option keeper or anything. They just got to worry about regular play action. And they've been near the bottom of the league in play action attempts. At least they were with Penix. They're running it more with Cousins. But Zach Robinson has been bizarre with his play action usage. You would think that with a guy like Bijan, you would be one of the highest play action running teams in the league, and they're not.
Yeah, no, they definitely are not. And so, Mookie, the other thing I'll ask you here, can Seattle's front four control this game without exotic pressures? I think they can. I want to know your thoughts.
I think they can as well. I mean, there's no high sack rates, I believe, from the Falcons. So they've not been a terrible unit. They have been banged up. But if you don't have open receivers, you're probably going to get a lot of covered sacks. So this might be one of those games where they could play coverage and just rush with four. And now you got Jaron Reed back, so you can rotate a little more so that Williams and Murphy don't have to play as many snaps. So I think that, Kirk Cousins is in for a tough day in terms of pressure. And, last year, not exactly an identical matchup, but Seattle's pass rush was getting after Cousins repeatedly and forced him into bad decisions, forced him into that game-changing or game-clinching strip sack fumble where Mafe got him and then Derek Hall had the scoop and score. So I don't think that the matchup has changed so much to believe that Seattle's going to do worse this year. In fact, there's every reason to believe they'll do better because Byron Murphy's an even better pass rusher than he was last year. And you've got Leonard Williams playing basically as well, if not better than he was last year. So there are just so many ways that I think that the Falcons' offensive line is going to have a hard time dealing with Seattle's front four.
Agreed. So, Mookie, let's move on to our three key matchups in this game. And so number one that I've got in this key matchup is Seattle's defensive line versus the Falcons' interior run blocking. Like, if Seattle's D-line can dominate the Falcons' interior O-line with Murphy, Williams, Brandon Peely, that's going to completely kill and deter Atlanta from having any offensive success in this game.
Oh, absolutely. Normally, it's like you got to stop the pass to take away to make them run. For a lot of the high-powered offenses, stop the pass.
You want to make them throw.
Yeah, this one you want them to throw. You want Captain Kirk to be throwing because he will put the ball on. His arm is just not great, and it's not like it's totally cooked, but he doesn't have that same arm strength. He can't move in the pocket as well as he used to, and it wasn't like he was a supremely mobile quarterback to begin with, but after that Achilles injury and then with just natural aging, there's every reason to force Atlanta into not just passing, but drop back passing. And with limited wide receiver skill sets, that's going to play right into Seattle's hands. So like last week, it was Minnesota's got this elite wide receiver, and Addison, when he isn't dropping passes, is normally a good receiver. And then you got Hawkinson as his veteran tight end. But you got one of the worst quarterbacks we think we've ever seen. So this one, you've got a quarterback who's on the decline, but at his best was a pretty good quarterback. But he doesn't have his best receiver. So they're very limited in terms of the receiver sets they can run. So you got to focus on taking away their running back.
Agreed. So the second one I've got here, Mookie, is JSN versus these slot and deep safety leverage plays for the Falcons. And what I mean by that is JSN has a massive advantage on his separation for one versus secondary. And two, the Falcons struggle with in-breaking routes. They have given up some of the most explosive plays to Diggs, post sits, different things like that throughout the season. So I think that's going to be a massive matchup for the Seahawks to take advantage of.
Yeah, and I think that JSN is such a pristine route runner that they're going to be able to get some of the looks that they want. And especially 2 weeks ago, I mean, JSN ended up getting matched up against Tennessee safety, and that's easy money right there. Now Falcons safety position, I think, is better. You got Xavier Watts as this promising rookie. I think he's playing. And then Jesse Bates, of course, is just one of those veterans who Cincinnati probably shouldn't have let go. But even still, elite wide receiver against a safety, you're going to take an elite wide receiver pretty much 10 times out of 10. And then in the slot, he can feast. This Falcons secondary outside of AJ Terrell isn't anything special, certainly nothing super special. I know they've had some issues there over the years that have irked fans. Like Mike Hughes last week gave up a critical touchdown against the Jets because he just straight fell down on his responsibility. It was a deep shot to, I believe, A.D. Mitchell. And Mitchell, for one, caught it. And then, two, he ended up getting a touchdown that got the Jets back into the game. So there are going to be some matchup advantages, I think, for JSN in this one, where I'm not sure Atlanta's going to be able to just bring two and completely wall off JSN and do what Minnesota did. You can't just replicate a Brian Flores defense overnight.
Agreed. And my last matchup key in this game is Reek and Spoon versus Bijan in space and the play action. Seattle has struggled occasionally with teams that are able to run effective play action, but like you said, the Falcons don't seem to do it a lot, so we may be okay. But I'm really going to be interested to see how Reek and Spoon come up and tackle Bijan in space, because he will have opportunities where he does get outside, and that's where they're going to generate, or Atlanta will try and generate most of their explosives.
Yeah, I would add Kobe and Nicky Manwari as well. Not even Julian Love as much, because we don't tend to see him down at the line of scrimmage a whole lot. So Nick is pretty much a Swiss Army knife. So he's got that positional versatility, but I think that he works better down in the box and at the line of scrimmage. So with his athleticism and his ability to chase down ball carriers, I'm curious to see what role that he will play, because I think that the secondary has had some tackling issues. And certainly Reek has had his tackling problems, but I think he's been much better lately. And then Witherspoon ordinarily is a very good tackler, but there is, of course, a weight room situation here. And Bijan is just one of those dudes you can absolutely run people over. And I think Bijan absolutely ran a Seahawk over last year, but I don't remember if it was Spoon or Kayvon Wallace, but it was somebody. So, yeah, making sure Robinson doesn't do work in space is going to be like by far the biggest thing, because I am comfortable with Seattle's secondary at stopping the receivers. And frankly, I'm comfortable with the linebacker. Every reason to be comfortable with their linebackers, meaning Jones and Thomas, and even Bori or any safety to run with Kyle Pitts.
All right, Mookie. Well, let's talk about the three keys to a Seahawks victory. Key number one for me, stop Atlanta's run game early. We've kind of talked about that and preached about it the whole night, basically. You take away Bijan Robinson this run game, their offense will collapse in on itself. Number two for me, protect Sam well enough to hit explosive. This is huge. The protection has to be better in this game, and that's on Clint Kubiak. It's on John Benton. It's on Olu. It's on the entire offensive line. You guys have to block and protect Sam better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been living and dying off of explosives throughout this season, and it's explosives off of play action too. So Sam Darnold is first in EPA per dropback with play action. He is 16th in EPA per dropback without play action. And it doesn't mean that Darnold he's not totally non-functioning without play action. It's just that there's this huge gap in how Seattle operates with play action, which is why last week 4 pass attempts from play action, and it consistently this season, when they're not running play fakes enough, the passing offense isn't really working outside of the Commanders, in which case everything was working because that's a terrible defense. So yeah, I think that we're going to see some more play action here, and especially getting Sam moving. Like, I don't want him just to have a play action where he's staying in the pocket. Getting him on the run, getting him to throw on the run, sneaking a tight end across the formation, and he could just have an easy throw out in the flat, or even you can motion JSN or Shaheed and have a simple throw underneath. So and it can turn into an explosive play with yards after catch. I think one of these things with the explosives is that they don't always have to be big in air yards. So the Walker screen a few weeks ago as an explosive play off of just K9 got in space and Robbie Utes was leading the way as a blocker. They have yak options on this team, whether Shaheed or JSN. When Horton comes back, he would be another one. Cup, not so much unless he's like wide open. And even AJ Barner has shown some yak ability too. So I believe that, yeah, getting the explosives back in action means that it should be an easier day for Seattle.
Agreed. And the last thing, I spoke about it a little bit, attack the middle of the Atlanta defense. Attack it, whether it's in the run game, whether it's in the pass game, just attack. They have constant breakdowns in the middle of that defense. Attack it. And part of that is with how much they like to blitz. There's going to be holes in there. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, and they've had issues with linebacker rotation much of the season. So I'm trying to remember who's on PUP. Like Troy Anderson straight hasn't even played this year, I swear. And they've had, what's his name? One of the linebackers that they've been just dogging the entire season, JD Bertrand, who just looks totally uncomfortable in space, can't really tackle, can't really cover. So he might get benched if he hasn't already, because if he doesn't get benched, Seattle's going to exploit it. That's going to be a classic. Whoever this guy is covering or whichever zone that he's responsible for, throw it that way. So Divine Diablo, I think he is healthy and he should be playing. And Diablo is certainly one of Atlanta's better defensive players, but they just don't have enough talent, I think, at that second level. And it really hurts their defense because their front four is really good, but it's the corner situation outside of Terrell and the linebackers where they kind of just average out into being this so-so defense.
All right, Mookie. Well, that kind of covers everything about us talking about the game. So let's check out what our 12s have been doing in the chat. There's a lot of you guys in there making comments. Love it. Absolutely. So let's have a look at some of the stuff that got picked up. So first one's from Dan. He goes, or I think he's supposed to say Cam Akers might play this week, and it came out as can. Yeah, I expect to see Cam Akers out there this week. I think, last week they gave it to Gaskin just because Akers had shown up that week. I think we'll see Cam get some touches at some point throughout this game if Seattle gets up by enough.
Probably. He might get a couple of carries in a neutral game state situation just to give both of them a breather. But yeah, I think that he'll get some run. I don't expect Holani back for a while, even after he comes off of, even after his injury reserve 4-week window has lapsed. The fact that he had a non-contact hamstring injury and looked pretty bothered by it, I think that Akers is more of a long-term thing and not just a 4-week thing.
Agreed. John McGrath, always good to have you in the chat, my friend. He goes, was hoping to see more of Wright with Holani being sidelined. He had a great preseason. I think they're just stashing Wright, to be honest with you. I don't think they want to put him out there and potentially lose him at some point. I think they're kind of just stashing him.
Well, he's on practice squad IR, so it doesn't really matter at this point.
Is he still on the IR for the practice squad? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is. So, like, if that's the case, then he's probably not back this season, and they don't absolutely need him right now.
Agreed. We've got Jason James comes in. He goes, idea to help you get over your 2,000 subs. Maybe do some contests, giveaways for the holidays, New Year. Let's get him there. Everyone subscribe. Have a great holiday, everyone. Great show, Mookie and Bryce. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. That will be something that will be coming in 2026, guys. I don't currently have anything to really give away merch-wise or anything like that. Unlike when I was on my previous show, the Hawk Zone, we had some merch, but that may be something that'll come down the pipe. But there will be some other cool things that will be part of the giveaways for the show in 2026 that I'm working on. So keep your eyes out and posted for that. Dennis comes in. He goes, subscribe to the content. Thank you, Dennis. And I appreciate you calling it the best content around. That's pretty high praise considering there is a lot of amazing content creators out there for the Seahawks. And I'm just lucky to know some of them. So I appreciate that. We've got John McGrath. Atlanta is really bad against the run. Should be a great game by our running backs. Hopefully Sam will get mobile too. Yeah. And that's something I think Seattle can do is lean into the run game, lean into the play action and boot plays with Sam to get him out of that pocket.
Yep.
What else do we got here? We got Sasquatch. Having a healthy running back in the playoffs can pay off very well. Yeah. And an ascending or trending upward running game can also be massive come the playoffs.
Yep, totally.
What
2019
else?
teaches a thing or two about not having a healthy running back and why we had to bring Marshawn out of retirement.
Hey, Marshawn, and we had to bring Turbo.
Yeah, that's right. Turbin had like 2 carries. Yes.
2 carries. Right. I thought Turbo was going to get more of that than Marshawn, but Marshawn ended up getting more of that. Can you name the other running back of the 3 that we had at the end of the year?
I think it was Homer. So we had
Homer.
Yeah, because Procise and Carson got hurt the same day.
Yep, in the Cardinals game.
2016 was also dire because like Rawls was not totally back. Well, he had a big game in the playoffs, but there was at one point in the middle of the season where Procise got hurt, and Rawls I think got hurt as well, and he ended up giving Boykin the backup quarterbacks and running back carries because they ran out of people.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like all the random Seahawk running backs we've had, and I was like, Fred Jackson's on that list. Like he was a guy we had.
Bryce Brown, and they had to bring back Christian Michael. And remember, they cut C. Mike in 2016 right before Procise got hurt.
And we also had CJ Spiller for a couple of games back there too, remember?
Yeah, he caught a touchdown in that. I think it was against the Jets.
It was against the Jets. Yeah, that's what I mean. Seattle's, we always talk about the center position in Seattle. And ever since the Max Unger trade, it's kind of been this like graveyard for us with centers. Running back in a lot of ways has been a similar situation because everyone seems to get hurt since Marshawn, and we've never really had a true, number 1 back again since. But John comes back in. He goes, Kubiak better not pull that conservative playbook out again against the Rams and Niners. He needs to call gas, no breaks games versus them. Yeah, it was interesting. I still think it's like a chef in the kitchen. Kubiak's really good at cooking his dishes, but then when he has to elevate them, he burns them like crazy.
I don't want to be conservative even in this Falcons game. Like jump on Atlanta so early that we get to see the backups for an extended period of time. I wonder if just because it's an SEC territory, they might just for fun make Milroe game day active for a change.
No, because then we're going to see weird pitch plays, and it's going to completely kill any offensive momentum, Mookie. Do not wish that upon us right now. Dennis comes back, goes, Bryce, are you going to do a film lab with Dan? The film you guys do is great. We are going to do a film lab. It will be next week, though. Dan had a couple things come up. He's had a pretty busy couple of weeks here and hectic in some respects. Obviously, Dan's going through some personal stuff. So, thoughts and prayers with Dan and his family right now. But yeah, we will be doing a film lab next week. We've got Kajab comes back in with late, but I had the opposite reaction to Mike's response on Ken. Interesting.
Maybe like courting potential teams for next year so that a possible comp pick is higher. I don't know.
Maybe. We got Howard came in. He says EJ Snyder on Hawk Blogger show yesterday said at this point of the season, don't mess with the O-line. Yeah, I saw that too. And I agree. You don't want to mess too much with continuity. Like if Sundell comes back and you want to put him in at center, then that's great. Put him in. But, don't mess with it. Don't make too many wholesale changes at this point, unless for injury. John comes back in with Bryce and I have been on 13-4 Island all year. I would be absolutely thrilled if they run the table. Yeah, John, it's still you and me. Dan jumped ship about halfway through the year. He bailed out and swam over to 12-5 Island.
Yeah, I'm with him on 12-5 Island, but I was on 11-6 Cove. So
that's true. You were on 11. I'm sitting here. It's like the Hawaiian Islands. I am currently sitting on the big island of Hawaii right now with 13-4 with John, and we're just hanging out, chilling out at the surf shack, having a couple beers, relaxing, and hoping this team can finish 13-4, which I got a good feeling they might. They very well might.
Well, if they finish 14-3 and win the division and win the 1 seed, Vikings fans might be the most pissed possible because only they could have 14-3 last year, not win the division, and result in a wild card exit, while Sam has the same record in Seattle and it is the number 1 seed overall in the conference. Like that would be a very Vikings thing to happen.
You look at that franchise and just some aspects when they've had successful quarterbacks have a good season and do well for them, how quickly they move off of them. You look at that year Case Keenum had where he had to take over. I think it was for Sam Bradford. Was it not that Sam got hurt and he took over for Sam Bradford and took him all the way to the NFC Championship game. And the next year he's out of town. They went with Kirk Cousins. Okay, fine. But like they seem to do that. They seem to just be snake bitten at the quarterback position, really, there in Minnesota.
And then like where they had, remember when Joe Webb started a playoff game at one time? But luckily Christian Ponder was so bad that frankly it didn't matter who they started that day.
It really didn't. Amy Holmes, our moderator of the chat. Love to see you in here, Amy. She goes, happy to hear you're not getting stuck on initial thoughts, Bryce. I won't. If I go back and see something in film, or I go back and watch after my initial reaction and post a show, I will come back and own it if I made the wrong assessment initially. And in some respects to what Bradford did, I did make, initial reaction, and that's why it is an instant reaction after the game. It's, an emotional one, and then you go back and watch the film, and it's no different than coaching. That's why one of the best things I think Mike McDonald has said is he very rarely watches film right after the game. He waits, decompresses, and then go back, because you have so much going through you emotionally, whether you're a coach, whether you're a fan. Sometimes it clouds your judgment a little bit. So that's definitely one thing I will always do. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Are you guys going to be in the Northwest Forever Discord this weekend? That's right, guys. I will let you guys know this. Go to northwestforever.com. Check out Dan's Patreon. Check out his Discord. And also, if you guys haven't already, hop on over to Josh and Mitch at 12 Talk Pod, the UK guys. They do a phenomenal Discord over there. They have a great watch party. I occasionally jump in there, time in and time out, and hang out there and watch the game and talk with all the other listeners. So if you guys haven't, sub up both to their shows on YouTube, along with Brandon Kane at Hawk Nest, and jump into any of the watch parties that go on, guys. They're a lot of fun. It's always fun talking out with the other Seahawk fans, so make sure you guys do that as well. What else do we got in here? This is an interesting one. I'd rather be flying next week comes back. He goes, hey, Bryce, I know you're a Seattle sports fan, but you also live in Vancouver. So are you a Golden Eyes fan or a Torrent fan? I am never a Vancouver sports fan, ever. I did not like the Vancouver Grizzlies. I don't like the Vancouver Canadians baseball team here. I am a Seattle sports fan through and through. I'm a Torrent fan. I do not cheer for the Golden Eyes. I don't cheer for the Canucks. I cheer for the Kraken. I cheer for the Supersonics when they played the Grizzlies. I will never cheer for Vancouver sports. The only team I will cheer for that is a Vancouver sports-based team is the BC Lions of the CFL, and that's because it's the Canadian Football League, and they're my hometown team there. But outside of that, anything else, I will always go with my Seattle sports.
God knows you don't want to be pulling for the Canucks this year. What a mess they are.
Oh, they are. And that is because the ownership for the Canucks is, I would say, on par with Jerry Jones' bad of managing a franchise. And until the Aquilinis sell the Canucks will never win a Stanley Cup. And you heard that here. We've got X-Wing Dispatch comes in and goes, found the 12s in the stands near me at the Torrent game when I got pissed at a low effort play and yelled, what in the Anthony Bradford was that? Sorry, not sorry. Oh, Anthony Bradford's going to be a meme guy going forward for a while.
But he can redeem himself this weekend, hopefully.
He definitely could. We got Kumar comes in with a $4 donation. Appreciate that. Kudos to Bryce, who's had a great year as the Hawks keep creating. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting year. Interesting 6 months, to say the least, with it. So it's been a fun ride. I'm really looking forward to draft season on the Hawks side. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's some cool things that are potentially going to be happening with the Seahawks Syndicate as well coming in, and at training camp as well this year. So it'll be an exciting, going forward for the Hawks eye here. So let's see if we've got any other comments in here. Let's see. I'm just having a look. Oh, here we go. Howard, have you guys got any chance to look into the draft? And if so, who do you see the Seahawks picking with their first round pick? I've started my draft process. I'm not too far into it because I've got so much going on with this team, obviously, right now. It'll be interesting to see what Seattle does. I don't know if they will have a first round pick come the draft. I think there's a chance that Seattle's first round pick will be a player they trade for and acquire in the offseason. Mookie, what about you?
They only have 4 picks right now. So I know this draft is considered a bit of a dog draft. And I don't think that the Seahawks would be wise to just have 2 or 3 drafts. Don't repeat 2021. Like you had your excuse for the COVID pandemic, and that's why you didn't want to. That's why you kind of lit those picks on fire and just got established players. But in this instance, like we don't have any of that stuff going on right now. It's just considered a weak draft class. So what I can see is Seattle maybe even making some surprise moves in the offseason to gain draft picks back, because they're not going to get comp picks next year. They ended up signing more guys than they let go who were comp eligible. So I believe that we're going to see a lot of wheeling and dealing, and the draft pick status that you see right now is going to look completely different come 2026.
Agreed. And we got Smoke Burp in here. Nice to see you in the chat. Is Julian starting? I don't think so. I think Julian is going to be on a rotation and you'll see him come in time to time. I think they're probably going to start Ty still. Again, Julian's coming off basically being off 10 weeks of the season. So I think it'll be a really ease in process into game action stuff. Because remember, he did come back for that Arizona game and then his hamstring let go again.
Yep. And then we went back into the facility. He said earlier this week he felt his hamstring get worse. So he probably had something since the Arizona game, and then just maybe he aggravated it even worse than he did the previous time. So whether he starts or not, we're kind of splitting hairs. I don't expect him to play 100% of the snaps. That what Jaron Reed, I expect him to have his normal snap count, because it's wrist surgery. It's not something that is as real touchy as a hamstring. But I think that the Falcons game, without no disrespect to the Falcons, is like a ramp-up game for Julian Love, knowing that they got two huge games in 15 and 16 at home against the Colts and Rams they got to deal with. That point is when I can see Julian Love, assuming there are no setbacks this Sunday, getting his full workload again.
Yeah, no, I don't even know if Julian, I think the thing I'll see is maybe you see Julian play, I don't know, say 15, 20% of the snaps on defense this Sunday, and that's high even. I think it could be even closer to maybe 10 to 15. Then I think you see him maybe play half of the snaps versus the Colts. And then that Rams game, I think you get full Julian Love back if there's no setbacks in there. Because to your point, Mookie, and you brought it up earlier, Tyler Cotta has played really good football as a safety for them this year. So it's not a situation of, yeah, we have to get Julian in there as quickly as possible because it's just such a gaping black hole. It's not Steven Terrell and it's not Tedrick Thompson or Delano Hill back there. Like, you actually have a competent safety as your guy that's coming to fill in.
Yeah, the one amazing thing about the Seahawks defense is I'm not saying all 11 players starters and then several of the backups are all equally like no worse. Like there are some quote unquote weak spots here, but they're not mega liabilities to the point where they break your whole defense, like the people you just mentioned, whether it's Hill or Tedrick or
Terrell.
Remember when Earl broke his leg the first time?
Yeah.
And then it went at Terrell. The literal next play, and Ted Ginn gets a 55-yard touchdown.
Yes.
So that's how instant collapse. Or whenever one of KJ or Bobby got hurt and they had to play like Brock Coyle or Kevin Pierre-Louis, and suddenly the defense just got a lot worse. So this is a case where think of all the injuries Seattle has had and how they have been able to so effectively replace those guys, not say like for like, but to keep the defense performing at a high level. So it's like when Seattle didn't have, I think it was KJ, no, I think it was Bobby during that Super Bowl run for several weeks, and Malcolm Smith was able to fill in adequately. But Seattle never really had that on a consistent basis where the backups could come in and wreck shop. Maybe Byron Maxwell replacing Browner when Browner got suspended was one of those examples. But by and large, toward the end of the Pete era, if you took a couple of key guys out goes the defensive scheme and the structure. With McDonald, this year, it's just been really impressive how the next man up mentality has just been a total buy-in from everybody.
Agreed. CJK04 goes cornerback with the first or right guard, Jennings or Dunger. I guess we're talking about the draft at that point. And then we've got Brian Myers comes in and goes, they have 2 or 3 possible solutions for right guard on the roster already. O-line is unlikely in round 1. I do tend to lean that I don't think O-line will be a first round pick. I think if they're going to upgrade that spot, which I think they do, it will be with a veteran. It will not be, because if you look at the way, and this is what, I've heard from people inside, they do like Bryce Cable do. They do potentially see him as a starter at some point. So you got one. Mason Richmond's another guy that they've had. Who knows what they think of Christian Haynes at this point. They may give it another go next year potentially. And They may move off. I think that the more foregone conclusion is Anthony Bradford will not be on this roster next year. That's almost the given one. And then I think they're going to bring somebody in, whether it's free agency or whether they trade for somebody. Like the fact that John's kind of okay sitting with the amount of picks he has right now and was able to give away what he did to get Shaheed. John's usually pretty on point with where he views draft classes and the personnel group in Seattle. Might be a good sign that John's not overly thrilled with this class at this point.
Yep. Misfit bringing up Brian Russell in the comments as far as Brian Russell was a starter.
Deion Grant,
one of the all-time worst signings by Tim Ruskell. He was a meme on OG field goals. Like that dude was a complete disaster. Ruskell got won over by all the picks he got in Minnesota, and that dude could not cover a lick in Seattle.
What made no sense to me back then when they had Deion Grant and Brian Russell as your two safeties is they moved Deion Grant out of a free safety to strong and put Brian Russell as the free safety. And it was like, that made no sense to me ever.
Yep. And what we ended up getting is Russell and unfortunately Big Play Babs against the Packers in that playoff game, having one of the single worst combo games by safety tandem we have ever seen. Like Ryan Grant had his career day against Seattle, even after a 14-0 lead in which he fumbled twice.
Yeah, I did like it when they did move Babs back to safety finally, and they actually committed to him being a safety after they got rid of Russell in that group. But like, man, you go back and look at some of the safety Seattle had, Bulware, Marquand Manuel for that Super Bowl run when Ken Hamlin got in that unfortunate scuffle after the Houston game when they blew out Houston in that 05 season. Like, they've had some good safeties. They've just never had consistent ones until really the Earl group kind of stepped in there, and we had that.
Yeah, and of course, shout out to the late Kenny Easley back in the 1980s as the true enforcer. But in more recent Seahawks years, I mean, we've been pretty blessed to have Cameron Earl for as long as we did, and we wish it was longer. And now Julian Love hopefully is part of that next generation of very good, if not great, Seahawks safeties. And to be determined on what happens with Ty Okada or Kobe Bryant, but you just love seeing good safety play.
All right, one of the last ones here. John McGrath, he goes, how happy are you to see Mills actually practicing already? I'm super excited for him. He may not play, but just participating in practice is huge and very impressive. No, I think it's great. I'm super excited that, he's back. The big knee brace is one reason why I'm super hesitant on if he actually will play, is because wearing that big of a knee brace that he's been seen out at practice with is still a concerning thing, and he may have to wear it for a bit, but hopefully he gets to come back and be a factor next year. I think he'll be a huge factor because I think he's going to make it really hard for Morris to stay on the roster next year because of the positional similarity. But yeah, no, I'm super ecstatic. Excuse me, that he's back. So
yeah, I think that Mills is going to be like a non-factor this year. It's like a medical red shirt. And I don't think Morris is back here next year because Morris he's a jack of all trades, master of none. And they seem to have given up on all the 5-tech stuff based on from what I remember of his alignments. So, and he's not a real people mover, when he's second deeper. So,
all right, Mookie, final word here. Give me your score prediction for this game on Sunday.
I'm going to go with a game where Seattle pulls away late. So it'll be kind of close in the first half. And then the second half, the Seahawks quell the concerns of the 12s and win something like, 27 to 13. Or maybe even 27 to 16 if I want to give the Falcons an extra field goal. The key to me is third down. Seattle is worst in the league at converting 3rd and 7 or longer, but they're amazing in 3rd and 1 to 3rd and 6. The Falcons are bad on third down everywhere. They are 29th in third downs. So if their third down offense doesn't work, more possessions for the Seahawks. And obviously you want them to stay away from third down altogether. But if they're going to get to third down, they can't get to 3rd and long because they just can't cope there. So Seattle's going to win. I think Smith and Jigba finds the end zone again. And I think K9 does get over 100 yards.
All right. I got a feeling this game will be close at halftime. I think it'll be something like, 17-7. And that's kind of close, for Atlanta in that situation. I got Seattle winning this game 31-10. I just think Seattle's going to run away with it in the second half. And I think in some, literal sense, run away with it with Kenneth Walker in this run game. So, I've got a feeling that Seattle is going to be going to 10-3 when they play the Colts back at home a few Sundays from now. So just a couple more here that have come in late, Mookie, that we'll just touch on before we get out of here tonight. X-Wing goes, I keep seeing video clips of the defense calling themselves the dark side. Sounds like that's the name they like for themselves. And Amy clarified it. It's the mob for the team, the dark side for the D.
It's the MOB, not the LOB. We just got to go to the next letter of the alphabet.
Makes sense. So, all right. Well, with that being said, let's Mookie, what do you got going on over at Field Goals that people can look out for just before the game here on Sunday?
Well, I guess I got to write up that Quentin Bohanna to the Packers store because we don't have it up on Field Goals right now. It's not so urgent that I'm going to write it today, but I'm sure we'll do some sort of game preview on Saturday. And then I will have my 5 predictions for Seahawks versus Falcons. So the bold prediction, offense, defense, opposition prediction, and the final score prediction, which I just gave away. Maybe I'll tweak it before Sunday morning. And then after the game, we'll have our usual post-game rotation of op-eds, whether from Ted Zahn and his Ted's Talks, John Fraley and his Words of Prey, me with my winners and losers column, and then probably on Monday will be Michael Thompson's 4 Down Territory. So I think I've covered all of the big op-ed post-game pieces that we do. So, and of course, I believe you'll have a post-game reaction show as well.
Yeah, I'll have a post-game reaction show as I normally do. Seahawks Aftermath, however, on Monday will probably not come out till either Tuesday night or Wednesday as I have a work trip I unfortunately have to go on. And then also tomorrow and Sunday, tomorrow afternoon, night, and Sunday morning, there will be 2 episodes dropping. One with Jackson Bevins of Cigar Thoughts, which will drop tomorrow night. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that one. And then Sunday morning, I'll put this out probably 8 o'clock, I'd say. So give you guys something to watch before the Seahawks take the field versus the Atlanta Falcons. I had an interview with Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks and Emerald City Spectrum. So make sure you guys have your notifications clicked for those to come out over the next 2 days here. So for myself, for Mookie, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Have a good night, everybody.